Welcome to the Heidi Thorne Show. I'm your host, Heidi Thorne. And in this podcast, I share my real world self-publishing and small business experience with you. So let's get started with today's show. Now, today I'm going to talk about a question that pops up frequently from people in my network, as well as one I see that often pops up in author forums. And it is about using events and expos to sell your books, and which ones are good and how does that all work. And so I'll first talk about two types of value that you can get from participating as an author exhibitor at these events and expos. The first one is PR value, and that one is public relations value. And no matter what show, event, or expo you participate in, you're going to get some public relations value out of it. How much you get really depends on the show itself and who the attendees are and everything, but you will always get some sort of PR value. The not so guaranteed value will be sales value. Now, there's also two types of sales value as well. There are direct sales to customers, and some shows and events are directly set up to do that. They expect that people are going to be vendors and going to sell to the attendees at the show. So that's direct to attendee sales. But the other type, and this is more for the industry and professional type shows, it would be called a sales lead generation type of value, where you're just collecting contacts, you're making connections, but the sale does not occur on the actual trade show floor. It is consummated off of the show. So what authors are probably more interested in is the one where they can sell direct to customers. Now, not all shows, events, and expos allow it. So you got to make sure when you're considering any of these events and expos that you do know whether it is allowed or not. And then there are some other issues in terms of selling direct to customers that can get kind of prickly. And the biggest one that I can think of is sales taxes. And if you're exhibiting in a state that isn't your own, you may be responsible to that state for collecting, reporting, and paying sales taxes on the sales you make in that other state or to people in that state. Now, it's gotten worse because in 2018, the Supreme Court decision of South Dakota versus Wayfair really empowers states to go after any business that is selling in their state and people that are and to people that are in their state. So don't get messed up in all of those really tough issues. And I know this from personal experience because I sold promotional products all over the country, and there was one situation where they had a client here in Chicago, but we shipped the items to another branch of theirs in another state. And then that other state hits me up with a 20-page form to fill out, like, well, what business am I doing in the state? And sometimes you might have to register as a retailer in these other states. So that's a really big issue that you need to be aware of. And you think, well, I'm just small potatoes, it doesn't matter. But, with states being empowered to go after everything, and they're looking for money. States are looking for money, so they may be very aggressive. So you want to talk to your CPA and tax advisors on how to handle that. So don't get stuck with with tax penalties and all of that for sales taxes. And of course, I know a lot of people don't think this applies to them either, especially authors. You will be responsible for income taxes for all of the books you sell at your events and expos. So you need to talk to your accountants and tax advisors about all of these situations. So that is the direct to sales situation there. Now, a couple of the other things that I've observed that are really problematic for all exhibitors, but especially for authors, is that event organizers really often don't know who their attendees are. Now, I know that sounds completely crazy, but it's the truth. They don't know exactly who they are. And what I found, especially at networking and Chamber of Commerce events, they'll say, oh, well, our attendees are small business people. Okay. Well, that could be everything from Mary Kay cosmetics representatives up to manufacturers who have 500 employees. So which is it? Yeah. So what this really entails, and I think this is really important, is that you need to attend the event yourself to kind of do reconnaissance to figure out if this show is one for you. And what you might want to do is just ask some of the exhibitors, don't tell them that you're going to be an exhibitor, or, they might take that as a competitive threat. But you definitely want to maybe ask some of the exhibitors, well, how's the show going for you? And what I found from being in the trade show industry years ago is that if exhibitors are unhappy, they are willing to tell everyone and anyone how bad it is. So you might get some genuine feedback that you won't get from the event organizer. So I really do encourage you to scope out these events for yourself before you plunk down some cash to exhibit at them. And one other thing, if you are kind of scoping out these shows, might be to go not on the first day, because a lot of times when the show opens, there's this flood of people and everybody's happy, even the exhibitors. And then as the show wears on, things get kind of dicey. It gets slower, the exhibitors get anxious, and as it gets closer, they get more and more anxious as the show closing gets closer. And going towards the end of the show might be a little bit better to get some feedback as to how the exhibitors fared throughout the entire event. So do your homework before you plunk down some cash, because some of these shows, and I've exhibited at them too, and it can be hundreds of dollars to get a booth or even a table at some of these events. And if you're not going to make any decent money off of it, it's going to be a waste of your time, even if you get the PR value that you will get from it. Maybe it just won't be good in terms of overall sales. And a lot of it is experimentation too, so you're going to get a feel after a while. Now, one of the other things that one of my author friends in my group mentioned is that even if the attendees are great at a show, they're the right people, a lot of them may not be willing to buy right then and there. And this would be for those direct to consumer sales that you can make at shows. They just weren't ready to buy a book there. They were looking for all kinds of other products, but not the books that she was selling. So you might also find people who are ideal, they might pick up some of your information, but they may not be ready to buy right then and there. So that is something also to consider. And I think one of the things is that I get a lot of questions, well, how do you find events? Well, to me, I've always been in a situation where the events find me. You see them all the time on social media, and you have to do some research too, especially if they're out of your general region. You might have to do some research, and you may have to do some visiting. So do your homework. Understand what your situation is when you're selling at events and expos, and understand the investment before you do. So that's all we have for today. I hope you found it helpful. And if you did, I would really appreciate it if you would rate and review the Heidi Thorne Show on the Apple Podcast app or iTunes still. And while you're on the Apple Podcast app, please subscribe to the show so you get more podcasts with helpful information. I'm also on Podbean and Stitcher. And if you want to listen on your Alexa, you just have to go to the AnyPod skill, and the video version is available on YouTube. You just have to subscribe to my Heidi Thorne YouTube channel. Now, my books are available on Amazon. You just have to search for Heidi Thorne, and my author page will come up, and everything is there. My audio books are on Apple Books app, which is also kind of iTunes, and also Audible. So you might want to check those out there. Also, share this show, the Heidi Thorne Show, with your friends on social media. And if you want to connect with me, my website is simply HeidiThorne.com. Thank you so much for listening and for your support. I'll look forward to talking with you again in the next episode. In the meantime, have a great day.